Now, properties of all size can be turned into really good parcels. And, we'll talk about it at the end of this video that, of course, a larger parcel is always better. Not always better, but a larger parcel gives you more potential up to a certain point. You can have excess acres and waste acres too, and we'll talk about that towards the end. But really, you can make a 5-acre big buck paradise, and you can do that with parcels that small, 8 acres, 4 acres, 10 acres, 12 acres, whatever it might be. There's still opportunity, and you really need to slant your parcel to various forms of habitat in the form of cover or food, depending on the location of the parcel. So we'll talk about 3 different locations right here where you could take that 5-acre parcel, and really what you should be focusing on with a tiny parcel. We've talked about 8 acres, 10 acres, but 5 acres, of course. I have had a 5-acre client. We've had 8-acre client. I've talked about that in the past. In Michigan, that was a really special parcel. Every year, if I have 100 clients, about 50 of those clients are 60 acres or less. My average client's about 100. I have lots of clients that are few clients, several clients that are several hundred acres. I've had them up to 4,000 acres, but really half the parcels I visit on an annual basis are 60 acres or less, and a lot of them are below 40 acres, so 22 acres, 26, 18, 16. And we've even had fly-in clients that are 30 acres, 26 acres, where we're flying several states away and visiting that parcel, and there's a lot you can do. But 5 acres, you might think there's not much you can do. And again, the potential is greater acre for acre, depending on if you're in that same general area, but there's a lot you can do. The first one, wooded small chunks. And I would equate this to a lot of suburban areas where there's 5, 10 acre parcels, 1 acre parcels. And what's interesting about those locations is that you have a lot of non-hunters mixed in. You have a lot of cabins, camps. And so what's different in a spot like that is you're not necessarily competing with the neighbor next door. I have a friend, Rich, where he lives in Michigan. There's a lot of parcels of this size, and he showed me some buck pictures this year of a couple monsters, at least one huge one that comes through the neighborhood. And you have that potential. I like these kind of areas because suburban areas, on one hand, someone might say, well, there's a lot of hunting pressure, and it's hunting pressured whitetails, and really the deer get used to people. They get used to people noise, people scent, people access, and moving around various portions of property. So it's not as high pressured as you think. It's not hunting pressure sitting on every fence and people around. What's interesting with this type of parcel is that often there's a lot of big mature woodlots in these locations. There's not a lot of quality food, but there's not a lot of quality cover. There's not, and it seems like in a lot of those areas I've been to, you have that swale that backs up to a marsh, and it's just 2 or 3 acres, and you have that cattail marsh. You have a little bit of upland cover, and it's amazing, a little bit of conifer mixed in, a little bit of hardwoods, some big oaks. How many deer filter through that area? You're really looking to capture deer that are moving through, not necessarily that are sitting on that property. It seems when you get into the rut, when you get into high pressure gun, and you get into those high pressure times, you get into the times where there's not a lot of cover, not a lot of food left, deer really tend to focus on those properties that are 5 acres in locations like this that have a lot of cover. And so you're looking for diverse cover. You're not just looking for one big clear cut of hardwood regeneration. You're looking for, I can think of a lot of areas where there's autumn olive thickets, might be honeysuckle, briars, red osier dogwood marshes, cattail marshes, mixed with little conifer islands, clumps, planted conifers, windrow conifers, trees, apple trees mixed in. And you're looking for as much diversity as you can. So if you're planning on buying a spot like that and even sticking a small home on it, or a home in general, look for that diversity. The more diversity, the better, because if you buy a hardwood chunk, you have a lot of cutting to do and a lot of planting, and you'll be further ahead buying a diverse parcel in a spot like this with 5 acres than you will be buying a hardwood parcel. It'll take 10 years for that property to develop with plantings and long term. And let's face it, if you have a home on it, the average homeowner owns a home for 5 years. That's a nationwide average. So you think you're going to buy this home in long term. We think we're here in Minnesota, we're going to own this home for forever until we die, but who knows? Could die next year, could die in 25 years, we could sell it 5 years, who knows? There's a lot of things that come up. But when you're buying a property like this and you have to develop, it takes 10 years. A lot of properties you can buy and you have that diversity already there, and really you're further off in 1 year with a property like that than you are with a hardwood parcel in 10 years, and that can be expanded to many acres too. So diversity is key, cover is key, and then I like food plots that are more linear, that really, again, you're trying to capture moving bucks as you're moving through the neighborhood, especially for the rut. So you're looking at small linear food plots, a lot of scrapes, 10 feet wide, 20 feet wide, upland cover, so there's not a lot of canopy, not a lot of shade. Could be that you put a lot of mock scrapes in front of each stand location. That's where I do encourage more of a mock scrape deer travel corridor. But you're talking thin, you're talking wavery. So if apple trees, you're keen on those apple trees, and it's more of a weave through the cover instead of a straight line, but it's linear and parallel to your border, so that when a buck moves through, you have several key stand locations around the outside that you can blow your scent to the outside, approach from the outside. I think of a lot of these parcels around a road or even two roads where it's a corner, and those are ideal because the deer get used to a lot of movement along the road. You can duck into a stand location 10 yards off the road and have a great hunt. So you're looking at something diverse, something thick, and then you're using food plots to create linear lines that you can actually hunt, maybe on the east side or the north side or south side, so you get prevailing winds, and you can take advantage of a lot of sits. And it's not that you're putting a linear food plot all the way around the parcel, but you're using key locations, maybe a U shape that connects to the swamp on both ends, where when deer do travel through, that you collect them and move them where you want to. You know, if in a dry area, water hole can be a great setup along with those mock scrapes. And so think about capturing movement. Number two, ag land. Now it's similar to the wooded small chunks where you have a lot of property. But those ag land areas where you have 5 acres of cover and it's surrounded by ag fields, and there's a lot of ag around, maybe 3 sides or 2 sides, then you need to make that property as thick as possible. Now sometimes you could take advantage of a 1 acre food plot on one end so that you have very thick cover, 4 acres, 5 acres, whatever it might be, and then they all come out to that food plot. And because you live in an ag area, then that food plot acreage goes a lot further. When you're in small wooded areas and you put a 1 acre food plot, if that's the only game in town, then it's depleted very fast. Where if you're in ag, you have the complement of the ag. So if you have the thick cover, you're developing an inside out parcel, even though it's small, and you're training the deer to hit that food for their number 3 feeding in the day. Again, they feed 5 times in a 24-hour period, so you have feeding 1 and 2 in their bedding areas and browse, maybe some acorns, and then they're feeding on your food plot for number 3, and then 4 and 5, they're off your land and feeding out in the neighbors' ag fields. And that's what's key about the ag field parcels. You can get away with a 1/2 acre, 1 acre parcel, and it lasts a lot longer, maybe even in the entire season, because you can move deer to that. They're only feeding on it about 1 feeding a day, maybe 1.5, and then they're gone. Whereas if you put a 1 acre food plot in that wooded area, then deer are feeding on that 3-4 times out of the day, and then they're traveling to neighbors back and forth at night, but they deplete that food plot very fast. And so that's where you need linear food plots to move deer on that small wooded parcel and subdivisions. And then in ag fields, where your cover and your food is the only daylight game in town, then you can get away with a smaller food plot. And that's the same with out here. We have ag on 3 sides, and so our food plots are still humming in early January here, and they're going to be probably, I would guess, till mid-February. And then we have a lot of rye, half of the fields are rye, so then they'll hit that in spring breakup and warm ups during the season when the snow's melted. And so we can get away with good food plots and good food plot space, and they last the entire season. And that's similar in that ag land, even on a 5 acre parcel, when you're dedicating at least 1/2 acre to 1 acre food plot off to the side. And I say off to the side because then you maximize your depth of cover. Let's face it, a 5 acre parcel is not that big. And even if it's the normal 10 acres cut in half, you're looking at 110 yards by 660 feet long. And so you're not looking at a huge parcel. So you want that entire 660 feet of depth going back into the cover, minus that food plot on the one side. And that'll allow you to actually maximize the amount of space where deer and bucks especially can feel comfortable moving through that parcel, especially when you have that food plot that's complemented by the ag field and lasts a little bit longer. Number 3, this is what gets interesting. I've been to some really cool parcels that are 5 and 10 acres. and they're surrounded by public land or big wooded settings where there's not a lot of hunting pressure and you're drawing deer from a long ways away. And in that case, you want all food. You want a large amount of food. You know, I've been to clients or friends that have 10 acres surrounded by public land. They have a 1 mile gated road to get back to that. And boy, those people, if they can put in 5, 6, 7, 8 acres of food, and it's difficult for other people to get back into that because it's large wooded areas, marshes, long ways to walk in, then that food can draw deer literally from miles away. So the power of food in a big wooded area where there's not a lot of quality food, like public land settings, big hardwood settings, can go a long ways. And the cool thing about public land or big wooded settings, a lot of times you're able to find permission to hunt on those areas, or in the case of public land, you can come in from a completely different direction, get back into those ridges or swamps or dry areas or whatever it might be, habitat change areas, and wait for those bucks to come back to you that are hitting your food at night, or you can hunt the food in the evening. So you can hunt morning, back in the public land, evening. And I can think back to, I had up to 260 acres at one time up in the UP in Michigan, but really I had about 8 acres of food plots, 14 plots. They were scattered in about 30 acres of the entire private parcel. And that was the game in town. So I shot a lot of bucks back on private land a mile away, 3/4 mile away. They were staging and really looking at that and focusing on that food every afternoon for that third feeding of the day. And that set that main movement. Now the cool thing about all of this, again, these are the same concepts. It doesn't matter if you have 5 acres or 500 acres, it's still the same concept of movement. You're still building food plots the same way. You're still building expansion. You're still doing the same thing in ag land, which is easiest to manage, suburban land, which is pretty easy, and then big hardwood, which is harder. Because deer move further. The further they move, the harder it is. And so, but you can expand this formula. And that's what I wanted to talk about, because obviously at 5 acres, here's the value per acre as far as your potential on average. Here's the number of acres on the bottom. You see 5, 20, 40, 60, 100, 200 acres. But you notice I have 40 to 120 right here, because that's where you max out in your potential. And the reason I say that, and we talk about this, the perfect hunting size, in another video, but 40 to 120 acres, 30 acres, we hunt 30 acres of cover in Wisconsin, 20 acres even. It allows you to tap into the same buck herd that someone that owns 300 acres. Then it boils down to how well you hunt it, how well you manage your land. And that's why your potential taps out at 40 to 120 acres. When you get into 200 and especially 300, 400 acres, you get into areas of waste and acres of waste. Now, if you're a poor hunter, if you're a poor habitat manager, you need more acres to find success. And that's why 800 acres, 1,000 acres can encompass a lot of mistakes. But if you do it right, you do it well, and you're a good hunter, you can get away with a fraction of the amount of acres. And that's why 5 acres can do really well if you follow the rules of managing small parcels and you hunt it well. You hunt on the right days. You don't spook deer. You don't tell the deer in the neighborhood, hey, you don't want to be on this land during the daylight within 300 yards because it's all hunters all the time and all hunting pressure. You make it seem like that 5 acres is the best spot in the woods. And I want you to think about, there's areas where there's 3 acres behind a house, a swale, and you're on the way to work and you see a big buck out in the backyard every single day. It's because those people don't intrude on their acres, and that buck finds that small little slice of heaven with a little bit of food in your yard or garden and some cover, maybe a couple doe family groups hanging around, and it holds them every single day, even though it's on a small parcel, because you don't allow the deer to feel the hunting pressure. It's no different than some of the 5 acre swales in the neighborhood, 2 acre swales where it's almost a drainage, the houses are all around it. It's amazing. I've seen some 200+ inch bucks come out of that in Oakland County, where someone's videotaping a giant buck in their backyard that lives in a 3 acre swale. It's the only game in town where there's great cover, great diversity, and it holds old deer, and it's on an extreme micro parcel. You have to make these 5 acre parcels, 10 acre parcels feel like it's literally a park that doesn't allow hunting with a lot of diversity. You might be able to think about that in some of your suburban areas and urban areas where there's giant bucks and they're along a highway. You see giants getting killed, and it's coming out of a 10 acre lot and a bunch of 10 acre lots. There's simply 2-3 acres in the back of each one of those lots, and that's where that deer's living. So there's a lot you can do with 5 acres. Again, going through the types of acreage, the wooded small chunks where you want linear food plots and thick cover, ag land where you might want a half acre, 1 acre food plot off to the side and really manage, again, diversity and thick cover. Wooded large chunks where you want to expand that to a lot of food and you'll draw deer in from miles around, especially in next to public land areas. And then you can expand this formula, and that's what we do. Whether I'm looking at a 40-acre parcel, 20, 15, 200, 500, it's the same concepts. It's the same thing. You do have a lot more potential. Imagine if you take this formula and you apply it to 200 acres like we're doing here. We have 178 here in Minnesota, or we apply it to the 30 acres of cover in Wisconsin. Same results. You still get to tap into the same number of bucks in the same neighborhood that someone does that owns 300-400 acres, 500 acres. You have that excess waste of acres then, and you're always better off. I mentioned this a lot in the next parcel in the video talking about the perfect hunting parcel size, but you get to tap into that. You're better off owning 3. We have our house here and everything, so it's a little bit different, but you're better off as far as hunting land goes owning 3 80-acre parcels in separate neighborhoods, even 4 miles apart, 5 miles apart, so you're not tapping into the same bucks, or different states, which is our goal, because we have more tags, then we get more hunting opportunity. Then you are owning one 240-acre parcel, because you're only getting to tap into 1 buck herd. With the 240, you get to tap into 3 buck herds, hopefully in 3 different states, ideally, with 3 80-acre parcels or 3 5-acre parcels instead of 1 15, or whatever you do if you're close to those state lines. And there's a lot you can do with 5 acres. Yeah, you're not going to compete with someone with 40 acres or 100, but you can get a look at those same bucks in the neighborhood if you do it right. You hunt sparingly, you hunt carefully, and make those deer feel like that 5 acres is a true sanctuary in the neighborhood. Now, as we transition into habitat season, I hope you've had a chance to check out my web class, How to Design Your Whitetail Parcel. It's on my website, whitetailhabitatsolutions.com. I have a link in the description, and I hope you can find it, check it out, and enjoy it this year.